Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar on KSA data privacy compliance. This is probably the third webinar we're doing. We've got a lot of interesting things for you today. It's not just going to be presentations and presentations. We're going to talk about case studies. We're going to talk about practical tips and insights. So whether you're a small, large, or a medium-sized organization, you will definitely have something worth your time and your investment. And special thanks to all those people who wanted us to do another live webinar, because this is the third in our series and we've got a lot of requests asking people to do it. So what you will get from this webinar, and we're going to start in the next 2 minutes. We're waiting for some more people. I think what you're going to get is a complete and absolute practical session, right? Between Amrita, Smriti, and Omkar, you got at least about 40 to 50 odd privacy instances, starting from consulting to implementation to automation. So you name it, they've had expertise in that. So we will wait for 2-3 minutes and then we will start. And then we will also have something very special for only visitors of this, attendees of these webinars. You can ask as many questions as you want to, and we would be more than happy to answer. And there'll be two promises that we would make. One is we would not leave a single question unanswered, right? And we will keep it simple and demonstrative. You can stop us at any point in time you have questions. If there is time, we will attend it immediately, or we will answer all the questions at the end of the sessions. You can either ask the questions on your chat button, or you can ask the questions on the Q&A button. Without much further ado, I think we've waited for a couple of minutes. Let's roll. Over to you, Amrita.
Thank you, Mukund. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on the fears, doubts, and uncertainty about KSA data privacy compliance. We are so glad that you could join us today. I'm Amrita Kamalon, and I am the Key Account Manager for GRC and Data Privacy in Ahlan Cyber. So in today's session, we will focus on the PDPL, which is a significant piece of legislation in Saudi Arabia that aims to regulate the collection, processing, and storage of personal data. As the law continues to evolve, it's very crucial for organizations to stay compliant to ensure the privacy of individuals and the protection of data. So whether you are a business owner, data protection officer, or somebody who is involved in legal and compliance roles, understanding the PDPL is very essential for navigating the complex landscape of personal data protection. We've been getting a lot of questions from our customers in the kingdom around PDPL, its scope, how to start the data privacy program, is it applicable to us, and so on. So here we are to address all those common fears and doubts around PDPL compliance. Omkar, could you please move to the next slide? Yeah. So I'm pleased to introduce our expert speakers for today's session. First, we have Ms. Smriti Pradhan, the delivery head for data privacy at Ahlan Cyber, with extensive experience working with over 30 clients across various industries, including BFSI, retail, government, conglomerates, and real estate. Smriti has earned a stellar reputation for her deep expertise. Clients consistently praise her for a customer-centric approach and her ability to break down complex privacy concepts and strategies. Her practical approach ensures that privacy is tackled in a way that is both accessible and effective. Next, we are joined by Mr. Omkar, our lead data privacy consultant. Omkar recently completed a highly successful project in Saudi Arabia where he was responsible for planning and implementing a privacy program for the leading real estate firm. His in-depth understanding of the nuances of the KSA PDPL has been invaluable in helping clients navigate the complexities of the regulations. We are very fortunate to have such experienced professionals with us today, and I am confident their insights will add significant value to this session. Omkar, next slide, please. Yeah, so we'll be covering the following topics in today's webinar: an overview of the PDPL's key principle and scope, practical tips on starting a privacy program. We'll also discuss few case studies to give you real life project insights about the common challenges that we face and solutions that we provide for that. We encourage you to actively participate during the session. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat or Q&A function, and we'll address them during the discussion or towards the end of the presentation. At the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A segment where our speakers will answer your questions, followed by a quick wrap-up. We'll also share the recording and resources with you after the event. So yeah, let's dive into the session. Over to you, Smriti and Omkar.
Yeah, so I'll be taking this thing up. So firstly, I'd like to share with you an important development in the realm of privacy and data protection within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. That is the Personal Data Protection Law of Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, also called as the KSA PDPL. So this law was passed way back in September 14th, 2023, but was recently enforced on September 15th, that is 2024. That is, the organizations were given 1 year to comply with the law. Essentially, the KSA PDPL is designed to protect the privacy of individuals by ensuring that all entities, both in public as well as private sectors, handle personal information of individuals like you and me in a responsible and ethical manner. It aims to create a clear legal framework that safeguards personal data against misuse or unauthorized access, while at the same time also allowing legitimate data-driven activities to flourish in the kingdom. A key player in enforcing and overseeing this law is the Saudi Data and Artificial Intelligence Authority, also known as SADAIA. So they have been given specific mandates and responsibilities under the law to ensure that organizations meet legal compliance. They manage data protection policies, and as well as SADAIA also supervises how personal data is processed and at the end of the day secured by all the organizations. At its core, this particular law focuses on protecting personal data, regulating data processing, and at the end of the day also guaranteeing individuals like you and me certain rights in relation to the personal data. Though this law gives individuals like you and me rights like right to access, right to delete data, right to even share data in a specific manner, etc. At the end of the day, giving you all control over your own personal data, but at the same time creating complex scenarios for organization when it comes to complying with these particular rights. So in short, KSA PDPL is both a protective shield for individuals and a guiding principles for organization. It fosters trust, clarifies obligations, and paves the way for secure, privacy-centric digital environments growth in Saudi Arabia. So, as we got some background about KSA PDPL, obviously a major question arises, is even KSA PDPL applicable to our organization? So let's understand this by taking an example. Let's say your organization, whether it is a large retail organization, a tech startup, or a multinational corporation, if it deals with data of individuals like customers or let's say even your employees are located within the boundaries of Saudi Arabia, and basically you collect information from these particular individuals who are situated within KSA, then this particular law applies to you. So this particular law applies to all forms of personal data processing, whether you do it manually, as well as it also applies to even automatic or let's say automating processes as well. But there is an important twist also over here, that is extraterritorial reach of this law. This means that if your organization stores or processes personal data of Saudi residents, no matter your organization servers or offices or your whole organization is not even based in Saudi Arabia, then too the Saudi regulators will be expecting compliance in relation to KSA PDPL from you. So let's take an example to understand this. For instance, you are a foreign marketing agency which is based in let's say France, Europe, and you don't have any kind of offices over here. But at the end of the day, you are running certain campaigns targeting Saudi consumers or let's say individuals who are actually based in Saudi Arabia. If you are doing that particular activity, even Saudi PDPL is going to be applicable on you, because it applies on each and every processing activities carried out on individuals' data which are based in Saudi Arabia, or let's say within the boundaries of Saudi Arabia. So in essence, if you process personal data within Saudi territory, or the data belonging to a Saudi resident or individual staying in the kingdom, PDPL compliance becomes your responsibility as an organization. So by establishing robust data processes, you not only meet the law's requirements, but also at the end of the day, build trust with customers, employees, and partners who value security and privacy of their personal information. And growing, and nowadays, this has become a very much important concerns of all the consumers and even employees out there. So with this, we come to a question, that is, what is the biggest challenge when it comes to implementing data privacy law that your organizations or you have faced when dealing with this particular law? I would request you all to please take this particular poll.
I would request you to answer the poll, because this will help us kind of fine tune the presentation a little bit. We can cover some parts in more detail and less, and cover some parts in less detail, depending upon the answer. So this is not something for us, but it will probably help you a lot in getting more value from the presentation. But while people are answering the question, Omkar, can you quickly tell us in not more than 30 seconds, is it similar to GDPR and where does it stand? That's one question
Yes.
asked by Mr. Raid.
Yeah, so in relation to this law, and so basically the genesis of the law in relation to data privacy, or when you say a mature legislation when it comes to data privacy, it is the GDPR. So the first specific law that came into picture in the 1990s was done by the European Union back then as the 9546 EC, which was presented by the European Union, which at the end of the day culminated into GDPR. So the recent laws that have been initiated by a lot of countries out there somewhere have their specific base in GDPR. But when we talk about KSA PDPL specifically, it borrows heavily from GDPR, but is not exactly the same as GDPR. The law has been amended in certain manner that it specifically basically it specifically handles the scenarios which we face, or the scenarios which organizations in Saudi Arabia face in accordance with their own particular law. Though it is similar, but not the same. It actually borrows heavily from GDPR, but it's not the same law.
Thank you, Rai. Thank you for liking the answer to the question. Great. Smriti, sorry, please continue.
All right.
Smriti, over to you.
Okay. So thank you everyone for joining. And I really hope that professionals who have joined us from the kingdom, this session is going to be really insightful. So we started with the fact that Kingdom today has its own data privacy law. A very common question that we hear from majority of our customers and organizations who are planning to build their KSA PDPL program. The question is, if it is a law, is it applicable to my organization? I'm working in a telecom industry. I'm regulated by my own laws. Is it applicable to my industry? So the questions are majorly around, is it industry specific? So when we talk about KSA Personal Data Protection Law, it's a federal law. It is applicable to organizations across all the industries. Of course, you have your own industry regulated laws, but this personal data protection law is a federal law, and this is comprehensively covering organizations across all the industries. So as the next step, organizations should be looking forward to protecting the personal data of the individuals that is entering within the organization. And I think somebody rightly asked that, is it similar to GDPR? So if you look into the way privacy principles are designed, the privacy principles remain the same across all the privacy laws. So be it GDPR, be it KSA PDPL, be it any other local law of the Middle Eastern countries, the privacy principles remain the same, which typically talks about accountability, transparency, purpose limitation, data minimization, and other requirements. But let's look into the way the objective of this law is designed, right? So GDPR's objective is to protect the personal data of the European residents. But when we talk about KSA PDPL, the objective is to protect the personal data of the KSA residents. So this is the reason why every organization in the kingdom, outside the kingdom, who are processing the personal data of the KSA residents, they should be looking forward to the compliance towards this program. Now, why privacy is taking a top priority, right? So today we have to understand that privacy is not just a regulatory issue. It is a fundamental concern for both businesses and consumers. And having said that, we would be talking about few insights that have been backed by the IPP, International Association of Privacy Professionals Consumer Trust Report. So if we talk about consumers today, an interesting insight is 70% of the consumers today feel that they're highly concerned about their online digital privacy. So today, you know that due to the increased footprint in the digital arena, the usage of social media and other requirements, today we see that a lot of people are bothered in the way how their personal data is being processed by the organizations. So this is where trust is taking a center seat while making a decision-making process by the consumers. And one more interesting insight is like 60% of the consumers are taking direct action in the way they want the organizations to handle their personal data. So what these consumers are doing, they feel that since their personal data is not being protected by the organizations, they're taking actions like adjusting their privacy settings in the products and services which they are offering. They're deleting the apps if they feel that the service is not in alignment with the privacy requirements. So basically, they're becoming more and more privacy conscious. So this is where it is very important for organizations to realize that when you provide a service to the consumers or when you're building products for the consumers, you really have to make privacy a priority. And that is where we come to a second scenario backed by the insight of this report. 93% of the organizations today rank privacy risk among the top 10 risk. Now, this is a very important insight because when we look into an enterprise risk management framework, generally data privacy risks take a backseat. But based on this report today, since we have privacy laws in more than 120 plus countries, and Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is one of those countries, today we see that a lot of organizations are prioritizing privacy. So it really tells us that it's not just about a regulatory issue, but the issue is way beyond just a compliance requirement, right? It is more about ethical data usage. It is more about providing that trust to your customers. So today, privacy for an organization is not an option, but it's a business imperative. And this is completely backed by the global surveys that have been undertaken by these organizations who are clearly stating that privacy programs are a must for an organization in order to have the customer trust built. So let's move into the next slide, talking about how organizations in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia really need to comply. And for that, why the focus is going towards the data privacy program. So today, I think Omkar has already given a brief that it was in the, so even though the law became effective in 2023, it was enforced in the year 2024 from 14th of September. So even that compliance deadline that was given to the organizations has already passed. So if there is an organization today who are still contemplating to build a privacy program, they should be really looking forward to it. Now, when we talk about the penalization clauses of this law, today, any organization which is found in violation of the KSA PDPL due to a massive personal data breach, the fines could really extend up to 5 million Saudi riyals, which in itself is a huge amount. Also today, if you are an organization which is processing personal data of the Saudi residents, they could be your employees, they could be your B2C customers, they could be any individual in your B2B cycle. You really need to register yourself with the data management platform that has been provided by the regulatory authority, which is SADAYA. And at the end of the day, any program becomes successful if you have a governance body overseeing the implementation of that whole program within your organization. So it is imperative for organizations today who are processing or who are bounded by the KSA PDPL law to set up a data privacy office so that you can comply to KSA PDPL requirements, and at the same time, you can oversee the implementation of that whole privacy program. So this is why privacy is taking a center seat now, and the focus should be on building the privacy programs going forward for the organizations bounded by KSA personal data protection law.
Thanks for clarifying this, Smriti. We've been getting a lot of questions about the penalties for the non-compliance. So I hope that answers most of the questions.
All right, and I would request the people to post their questions on the chat. And so we have, so I can see a question on the chat. I'll be addressing that, but before that, we have a polling question. The polling question is, have you identified all the data privacy regulations that might be applicable to you? Now, why we have asked this question? So you can, the basis of this question is, today we know there are a lot of organizations within the kingdom who have a global footprint as well. So as an organization today, you might be catering to customers from the kingdom. You might be catering to customers from the other Middle Eastern countries or any other European country. So do you know which all data privacy regulations are applicable to you? Because whenever you are building a data privacy framework, it's very important you understand the privacy landscape that is applicable to your organization. So let's have this polling question, and we are waiting for your, so you have two simple options here. Either it's a yes, you already know which all privacy regulations are applicable to you, or you don't know which all privacy regulations are applicable to you. So we would request your response to this polling question.
Give me a customer insight. Tell me, sometimes you would have met customers who believe that they've identified all the data privacy regulations. How right are they, or have they missed, or do they miss something more important?
Right. So this is a very common thing which we have seen whenever we start building programs for our customers. So we really expect the customers to understand the data privacy landscape well. And that is where sometimes we also get involved with the legal team to understand, are they tracking the regulations that are applicable? So we have seen customers, when we start building the program, we know that, there's a certain regulation that is applicable, maybe because of the customer base they are catering to. So for example, today, if you look at countries like Qatar and UAE, they have their own data privacy laws. So we have worked with customers from the kingdom whose majority of the customer base is from the kingdom, but there are certain entities for that particular organization who are also catering their services to the customers in other Middle Eastern countries. So in those cases, what happens is you are not just bounded by a KSA PDPL law. Since there are laws applicable in the other countries as well, you really need to understand that how those laws can impact your organization as a whole. Because just like Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has an extraterritorial jurisdictional effect, all the other Middle Eastern laws which are existing today in UAE, Qatar, or Bahrain, or any other country where they're already effective, they too have an extraterritorial jurisdictional effect. So today, if you have customers in UAE, today as an organization, if you have customers in Bahrain, you are also bounded by the data privacy law. And a lot of times we have seen customers missing these small nuances, right? So once we start building the program, then we get to know as part of our gap assessment that yes, these are the laws which are also applicable to the customer organization. So that is a very common challenge which we see. But then as we build the program, like I told you, privacy principles remain the same typically. So the framework comprises of all the requirements, and that's how the program proceeds.
Smriti, we have another question from Raid. Is the law for Saudi nationals or all residents, including expats? And does it apply internationally for Saudi nationals, as GDPR enforces it on all organizations that employ any European citizen?
So any law today, it is for the KSA residents. So as a citizen, if you are staying in US, it is not for you. It is for people who are residing within the kingdom. It is for residents. Similarly, GDPR is for European residents. Unlike few laws, like if you look at laws from China, they go much more stringent on the resident and the citizen part, but these laws are typically meant to protect the data of the residents residing within the country. I think the next question somebody has asked is, are all organizations, even with no marketing activities, required to register with Sadaya? Okay. If yes, can you share the link? Okay, so this is, I'll go to the second part of the question first, and then we'll come to the first part. Yes, so it is a publicly available link on the National Data Governance Platform, and you can register there. And the question here is, the question is coming from the concept that organizations who are not involved in marketing activities, maybe they don't have to register. No, that's not the case. So today, as an organization, you are handling data of your employees as well. You're handling data of your B2C customers as well. There is a high possibility. Maybe you are not a very marketing centric organization, but even as an organization which is involved in providing services and consumer goods or any other services, right? You need to make sure that you are registering in the platform. It is not very specific to organizations who are providing marketing services. Okay, then
We have other questions too, so maybe we have to park the questions toward the end of the presentation. Otherwise, we'll not have time to cover all the slides. What do you say, Mukund?
Yeah, let's take care of it. But we promised, and we will keep our promise. We will not leave even one question unanswered. So we will continue the presentation, and then we will answer all these questions, and we are writing them down.
right.
Yes.
Carry
And
on.
I think there are questions around hiring of the DPO and other things. We will talk about those guidelines shortly. Once we come to the end of the presentation, we will be taking all your questions and we'll answer that.
Yeah, and also your favorite question is also asked, Smriti, which department should own PDPL? That question is also asked.
We will talk
So
about
will
it. So
cover
we
that.
have a
Yeah.
specific slide on the accountability. And when we are defining accountability, which team is going to take it, we will give you practical examples. We will talk you about the models, how it works in different organizations, and we'll be talking about that as well. So how can we make the implementation of the personal data protection law much easier? So anytime, whenever you build any program, you need to make sure that programs are sustainable, be it privacy program, be it any security program. It has to be sustainable. It has to be practical. It has to be operationally viable. So these are some critical requirements. And now we will talk about how you can make it easier. So over to you, Omkar.
Yes, thank you, Smriti. So at the end of the day, establishing an effective privacy program for a holding company, or let's say any kind of company out there, is a must, or let's say a very important thing. And when it comes to let's say a holding company or a conglomerate, it involves navigating series of interrelated challenges. Unlike a single entity business, larger organization often encompass uh, multiple subsidiaries and diverse operations. So each with their unique data handling requirements. So this complexity makes it essential to develop a cohesive enterprise-wide approach to privacy rather than a fragmented or let's say a siloed effort. So starting with, first comes understanding the business context. A thorough grasp of an organization's structure, strategic goals, customer base forms the foundation of any robust privacy program. By by somehow mapping data flows across various subsidiaries, business units, regions, leaderships can identify where personal data information is actually collected, how it is processed, and which teams or systems are actually involved in it. This mapping lays the groundwork for tailored policies and controls that respect each unit's distinct operational realities and yet align with the overall corporate objectives. The second one is somewhere even layering technology into your privacy practice. So technology plays a pivotal role in privacy compliance, like automating processes, monitoring compliances, and ensuring robust security measures as well. So tools such as data discovery, classification, also tools that enable encryption, etc., can streamline the identification and safeguarding of sensitive information, or let's say personal data in your organization. However, technology alone cannot solve all privacy challenges. Even the most advanced solutions need human oversight. Clearly defined rules, regular updates to stay aligned with evolving business needs and regulatory changes are the need of the hour. The next aspect that an organization needs to look into are actually defining the KPIs. So it's crucial to establish KPIs to measure the effectiveness of the privacy efforts, whether tracking incident response times, the number of privacy impacts that an organization has already conducted, the so so actually closing of the audit findings, etc. KPIs provide somewhere a visibility into areas of success and the potential risk that an organization would be facing in terms of privacy. And regularly reviewing these metrics are also very important, and also promotes continuous improvement, ensuring that the privacy program remains up to date. And then lastly, it's developing the policies and processes. So underpinning technology and KPIs are actually formal policies and procedures that guide day-to-day operations. So these documents define how responsibilities have to be carried out, outline escalation paths, clarify how data incidents should be reported and resolved, etc. and etc. So standardized processes support consistent compliance across enterprises, especially in complex organizational structures with multiple lines of business that are being conducted by the organization. So in summary, building a sustainable privacy program requires balancing technological solutions, organizational awareness, KPIs, and at the end of the day, well-crafted policies. By addressing each of these elements before diving into the execution of the program is very vital. So organizations need to establish a strong foundation that not only meets the current data protection requirements, but also evolves with the evolving regulations that we have. So now let's look into, or let's say delve into some implementation strategies that an organization can have in relation to implementing their privacy program. A critical first step over here is to embed privacy into the corporate governance, ensuring that data protection becomes a top level priority. This means involving the board of directors, the senior leadership, the senior management in defining the privacy objectives, and at the end of the day, integrating them into the organization's overarching risk management strategy. And at the end of the day, fostering a culture where safeguarding personal information is not just one team's responsibility, but it's everyone's responsibilities. Next, it's vital to adopt a holistic view of data governance. Rather than handling privacy requirements in isolations, we need to integrate them into the broader governance framework that encompasses data management, analytics, and also security. So doing so promotes operational efficiency. Teams can work with a single unified set of policies and procedures. So this integrated approach also leads to more informed decision making. As leaders and staff gain comprehensive understanding of how data flows across their segments of the organization, they have more insights when dealing with data related incidents, or let's say personal data related incidents. And finally, organizations must also prepare for the future by building an adaptive compliance program. An organization knows, okay, what are the privacy regulations, and these regulations are actually evolving in nature. As you might be knowing that even guidelines have been issued by SADAIA even recently. So even last month, this month as well, a guideline has been given in relation to personal data implementation by SADAIA. So with the organizations and the regulatory authorities, even we as organizations should also be in a position to evolve with the evolving changes to the regulation. And at the end, and at the end of the day, it is imperative for us to regularly review internal policies. We need to train our staffs on the new obligations and track the emerging legal requirements. Staying proactive in these areas mitigates business disruption and basically preserves stakeholder trust and positions your organizations to respond smoothly and confidently when actually the change actually arrives to us, or let's say an incident or a particular audit from the regulatory authority arises.
Okay, Smriti, I have a question. Look, you've been practicing KSA PDPL probably for the last 2.5 years now. Question is, has the awareness amongst the board members and the CEOs has it increased? Yes or no? And who do they typically question about the implementation status? If you can just give us a quick answer, that would be great.
So there is no specific answer to it. It's a very subjective question which you have asked, Mukund. So when it comes to awareness among the board members, yes, people have started taking it seriously, especially from the year 2023. I'll not even say 2024, because that's the time when the regulatory body, they said that you have 1 year compliance grace period to comply with the law. So the awareness among the board members that they need to build a program, that has definitely come up, that yes, they need to build, but how seriously and how skillfully they want to build the program, I think that is what we need to focus on. Because today, a lot of organizations who are entering into this kind of a program, they are looking at more like a compliance checklist, which is not the case. And I'm giving you a direct example from the meetings and from the sessions which I've been attending for from the Sadaya, right? They are very, very clear that if you are going with a checklist kind of an approach, we are going to make sure that in audits, that is something which we will highlight, because when you go with a checklist kind of an approach, you don't cover all the requirements holistically. So I think the awareness about how skillfully you need to build a program, how efficiently you need to build a program, going beyond just a checklist kind of an approach, I think that is something that needs to be still, instilled amongst the management of the organizations. But yes, when it comes to that, yes, we need to build something in PDPL. I think everybody has that fair share of knowledge, Mukund. And we will be talking about accountability. I think we have a slide on that, and maybe we can move on to the next slide, Omkar.
Smriti, I have one question meanwhile. Is it applicable for all the companies? I mean, we know that for very big banks where they have huge volume of data, yes, it is applicable. What about small organizations where the data volume is
the law is applicable to all the companies. I think the question here is a DPO required for the small companies?
Here's also, yeah.
Yeah, correct. So the question is on that. So I think this question is a very good question, because we have a guidelines when you have to hire a DPO, and certain variables have been placed on those guidelines. So like you mentioned, if I look at this question, it has been clearly mentioned that it's a small organization. We deal with very small volume of data. So one of the variables when you want to hire a DPO, what the law states is that extensively, you should be involved in large scale processing of personal data. Point number one. If you are an organization which is also processing a lot of sensitive personal data, then again, you need to go forward with hiring of a data protection officer. Now, what determines large scale processing of personal data, right? Let's look into that. So today, if you are an organization which is operating in multiple jurisdictions, which is operating in multiple business operations, you are an organization which is heavily B2C kind of a company, then you know that the personal data that is entering within your environment is massive. And in those cases, you really need to look forward to a governance structure that can, implement and oversee the whole program. And that is where a DPO is also required. But for smaller organizations, you can have a shared kind of a responsibility, but then this all depends whether and how you have gauged those variables. So there are 3 to 4 variables which we typically look into when we hire a DPO. And those guidelines are also available. And that is where we would request you to go through that. And if you are an organization which is fulfilling one of those requirements, you might be required to hire a DPO. So that
the follow-up question, Smriti, on that, is the DPO required to be a Saudi national, or is it fine?
Okay, yeah. So they are not very specific on the nationality. So it could be a contractor, it could be an employee. These all things are mentioned in the guideline. They are not specific on the Saudi nationality. So that is not yet a requirement. So I think somebody asked this question right now. So that requirement has not yet come up. Maybe it can come up in future, but till now it's not mandatory. Okay. So moving on to the next slide, and I think there is a person who has also mentioned a use case about a local sales company giving data to a manufacturer in a different company and how the laws work. We will talk about that since we are short on time. So we will complete the slides and we'll take those questions. Okay. So the guidelines of the DPO are publicly available. You can find it on the Sadaya website. So that is something which is already there. So now let's look into what you need to focus on if you are building a KSA PDPL program. So for any organization today, I really ask them that understand the footprint of your personal data within the organization. So as an organization today, you really need to make sure that have you identified the departments which are holding personal data? Have you identified the processes which are processing personal data? Have you identified the applications which are holding personal data? Now, this personal data could be for your employees. This personal data could be for your B2C customers. This personal data could be for any individual in your B2B cycle or your vendor relationship life cycle. Have you identified those systems and processes? And for that, the first step for any organization today is to move forward with a personal data discovery and a classification exercise. And this is a requirement in order to ensure that, you are building the right strategic program in place. Once you identify where the personal data lies within your organization, you need to conduct certain assessments in order to gauge the privacy risk within your organization. So that is where you have to conduct privacy impact assessments. You have to conduct certain other assessments that are expected from the law, that is legitimate interest assessments, transfer impact assessments, and other requirements. Moving on to the third requirement, once you know what the risks are, the laws typically, any law today that is built, be it GDPR, be it KSA PDPL, they talk about protecting the rights of the individuals who are the residents of Kingdom Saudi Arabia. So these individuals, legally, they are known as data subjects for an organization. So for any organization today, data subjects could be your employees, it could be your end customers, it could be any representative who is there within your B2B cycle whose data, personal data you are collecting. So all these data subjects, they have been given rights by the law. So as an employee today, I can come to the organization and I can ask my data to let me know what all data you are collecting against me. I can even ask you to delete my data. And there are certain 4 to 5 rights that have been given under KSA PDPL. So that is where organizations need to have a data subject rights management program in place. Moving on to the fourth requirement, which is around management of consents. So when we talk about consent management, a lot of organizations today, they try to market their services and their products. And for that, they might be communicating to their customers through emails. They might be communicating to their customers through mobile communications, maybe WhatsApp and other channels, right? So today, the law has given examples that today, if you are involved in direct marketing, if you are involved in direct advertising to your customers, you need to make those processes based on consent. So that means until and unless your consumer or your customer tells you that I am okay to receive this email from the organization, you should not be sending those direct targeted mailers. So for that, organizations need to have a consent management system in place, and this is an obligation that is directly being drawn from the law. The next requirement of the law is around a personal data breach notification mechanism. So today we know that it's not just Kingdom, but many countries in Middle East today, they are prone to cyber attacks. And a lot of these attacks majorly leak the personal data on the dark web. And that is where the laws really want to protect the rights of the individuals. So today the law expects that if you know that there is a personal data breach, you really need to notify the individuals whose data has been breached within a certain timeline. Not only that, you have to also notify the regulatory authority, that is SADAYA, in case a personal data breach has happened. And then there are certain guidelines related to that. The next requirement of the law is around a data privacy office and an officer. So I think a lot of questions have been around that. So depending upon the scale of the organization, depending upon the activities of the organization, you can move forward and you can hire a data protection officer. But as a recommendation, we suggest that personal data protection is a responsibility of each and every organization, be it a small size organization or a medium size organization. So at least you need to have a data privacy mechanism built or a governance structure built within your organization with the resources so that somebody can oversee the whole privacy program. The next requirement of the law is around maintaining something called as a record of processing activity. It's also acronymed as ROPA. So this is a compliance document that is being expected from the regulatory authorities. Now what it is, right? So for each and every process that you identify today as handling personal data, you need to track the life cycle of that personal data in that particular process. So for example, HR department, if they're having an onboarding process, so for the onboarding process, how you are collecting employees' information, are you transferring that information to any other department? How long are you storing the information? And any other information that is related to the personal data management. Now, this compliance document is expected even from an audit perspective, and every organization is supposed to have it across the departments. The next requirement of the law is around the cross-border data transfer mechanism. So as an organization today, you might also be involved in cross-border data transfers. Please make sure that even though PDPL is flexible in transferring the data abroad, but then the transfer has to happen according to the mechanisms that has been provided within the law. So certain mechanisms like having contractual clauses with your providers, having a list of adequate countries where you're transferring the personal data. So there are multiple mechanisms which are available within the law. And if you fulfill those requirements and if you do a transfer impact assessment and you know that the risk is low, you can go forward with the cross-border data transfer. The next requirement of the law, of course, is around the security for privacy concept. So today, privacy by design is something that is recommended to be built within any application which is being built within the organization or any product that is being onboarded. So privacy by design should be the focus of the organization. So let's say today you have a system which is holding sensitive personal data. So sensitive personal data has been given extra protective measures under the law. So you really need to make sure that the data is protected, and maybe you can move forward to mechanisms like encryption, role-based access, and other things. So, so law is fairly clear on that. All these laws are prescriptive laws. They are not descriptive laws. So please look out for the guidelines on how to do it. And then finally, the requirement of the law is around the registration on the National Data Management Platform that is released by SADAYA. So you need to register as an organization in the platform. Other than that, there are certain requirements with respect to the transparency principle. So as an organization today, if you are collecting data from websites, if you have a website, if you have a mobile application, you need to deploy privacy notices. Privacy notices are crucial to let your customers and your employees know what kind of data is being collected, how it is being managed by the organization. And you also need to have a privacy policy for your organization, which is an internal process, telling your employees what the organization privacy framework is, how they need to protect the personal data of the individuals that is coming within the organization. So typically, you have these many requirements coming up for an organization. And if you look at the law holistically as well, if you start with these requirements, you are making sure that you are reaching a certain level of maturity. If there are any questions, you can please put it on the chat. We can move on to the next slide, Omkar.
Nruti, is it possible to answer one question in 30 seconds? If yes, then take it up, or else we can answer it in the end. How frequently does the PDPL audit need to be done?
PDPL audit, it's not something which you can decide. The audits will happen from the regulators, and regulators are going to become very active from the year 2025, and you will be informed in advance. But yes, internal audits you can conduct so that you can ensure that you have the right readiness when the external regulatory audits happen. So internal audits you can conduct at least once in a year, or you can also conduct it like bi-yearly, right? Just to check your readiness. So these are again recommendations, but for the important part is starting with identifying where the personal data lies within your environment and then going forward with that whole program before you reach the audit stage.
Great, thanks. You managed it within 30 seconds. Excellent.
Okay. So practical tips for privacy. So first of all, I think we are talking about clarifying accountability here, and there are certain questions around whose accountability is. So again, it's not a one size fits all model. We see multiple kinds of models coming up here, but very important thing to consider. Somebody has asked if there is no DPO, CCO will take the responsibility. It's not something a straightforward yes or a no answer. That depends what the structure of the organization is. But whenever you put a DPO responsibility on anyone, just make sure that there is no conflict of interest. So when you look at global laws, even like GDPR or KSA PDPL, if you look at the guidelines, they have clearly mentioned the person who's taking the DPO role, there should not be any conflict of interest. And that is where the recommendation also comes that technically CISO should not become the DPO, because DPO is more of a governance role. And also there could be biasness towards the kind of risk that need to be mitigated. So I'll take an example here, a very simple example. So for a CISO, let's say you want to implement a fraud detection system and you want to go forward with an employee monitoring system, right? Because for you, a cybersecurity risk is taking a priority. To detect fraud, you might go for an employee monitoring system. But this might not sit well with a DPO, because employee monitoring, again, violates the privacy rights of an individual. So if a single person is taking both the responsibility, there is a possibility that biasness can come towards a certain risk. And that is where whenever you're going for these kind of models, make sure that there is no conflict of interest. And this is something which is clarified very clearly on the guidelines. Then accountability is something that has to be taken up, and depending upon the kind of work that is expected in a privacy program, the work is massive. And it's an ongoing process. It's not like you have implemented 6-7 things and then you are done. every year new processes will come up, new applications will come up, and the program has to go into that as a state. So just like a cybersecurity program is running, you need to have a privacy program running within the organization. Start with a risk-based approach. For that, it's very important that you start with identifying the footprint of personal data and how it needs to be protected. Identify the gaps and the risks, and then you start working towards the mitigation. Very important thing, it's very important to have a comprehensive privacy framework in place. Doesn't matter if it's only KSA PDPL that is applicable to you or you're bounded by multiple global regulations. Make sure that your framework is built in such a way where you are covering all the data privacy principles. Now, principles typically remain the same. Now, when we talk about information security, typically we hear these terms as confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But when it comes to privacy, it becomes transparency, accountability, and linkability. So when we talk about the privacy framework, the framework covers key privacy principles of accountability, transparency, purpose limitation, data minimization, and storage limitation. So these are the principles, and your framework will be built upon that. Build the policies and procedures, and then start operationalizing it. Very important part of a privacy program today, if somebody is of the opinion that data privacy office can handle the whole program, maybe we don't require much involvement from the various business departments. No, that's not the case. Even though the governance will be taken up by the data privacy office, it is very important to have the training and awareness programs running across the departments. Because every department would have a certain role to play, because at the end of the day, they would be enabling the data privacy office to run the privacy operations. So employee training and cultural awareness on data privacy is very, very important and very crucial to build the privacy by design culture within the organization. Once you fairly know what you are doing in a data privacy program, you can move forward to automation requirements where you can incorporate a technology to make your privacy operations much more easier. Since data mapping is a crucial requirement under the privacy laws, consent tracking is a crucial requirement. It's always important that you have the right technology solution in place which can make your work easier and adaptable. And finally, monitor your privacy program. I think somebody rightly asked how frequently do we need to conduct it. Focus on the internal audits. Once you have an operational privacy program in place, conduct audits, and give some time for the audits to happen, because if you're an organization which is building a privacy program, it will take some time to operationalize it as well. So have that sample data ready, and then you move forward with an internal audit approach before you go forward with a regulatory audit. Okay, so these are some of the things how you can practically start any program, and you can keep asking your questions on the chat, and we'll be more than happy to address it. We can move on to the next slide, Mukund. Okay, so the question here is, have you identified all departments that own PII? PII is personally identifiable information. So like I told you, for any program to start, you really have to start the program by identifying the personal data footprint within your organization. Are you aware which all departments are handling personal data today? Are you aware which all applications are handling personal data today? If yes, you can mark a yes. If no, you can mark a no. And yeah, that's the polling question 3, and we are looking forward to your response. Should we take a question, Amrita and Mukund, now?
I think you should go for it, but take the shortest ones first. Amrita, just ask something that has Smriti can answer quickly.
Yeah, there is one question regarding how Sadaya can ensure that all organizations will comply with PDPL. Is there
Correct.
any? Yeah.
Correct. So Sadaya will be overseeing the implementation of the programs within all the organizations, and that's the reason they have been doing. If you follow social media channels like LinkedIn, you will see that a lot of guidelines are released by them. It's very important that you go through the Sadaya website for each and every requirement, which I was stating as when I was discussing the privacy impact assessments and other requirements. They have provided guidelines on that, and this is where they're ensuring that the organizations also receive the right support for them. Now, Sadaya also have their own contact information. In case you are struggling with building something, you can reach out to them and they will provide help to you. So yes, there are multiple awareness programs that have been taken up by them. There are multiple guidelines that is being released by them. And this is where they're supporting the organizations. And also, once you register in the National Data Platform, you would see that you can directly, connect with them for any queries as well. So they would be, because that's part of audits, any regulator, right? It's not just about Sadaya, but we have seen how regulatory audits generally happen. They would ask you for evidences, which you will have to submit and other requirements. So you have the right support in place from the regulatory authority, and it's always recommended that you go through their website for any new updates.
Priti, so it's 31%, which is according to me a good number, have said that they have not been able to identify departments that own PII. And 69% say yes, they have. Is it in tune with what you observe with the clients, or do you sometimes listen to the clients and they say yes, we have identified, but then you find gaps? Just talk us through it for maybe a minute.
Yes. So I'm not very surprised with the polling result, because I understand, because privacy, and we understand, right? When can we expect the enforcement by Sadaya? Okay, the enforcement would have started by now. It was supposed to get enforced from 2024 September. So enforcement is already active, Imran, if that's your question. But yes, audits can happen at any point of time, depending upon if they're receiving any complaints from the individuals, or they're going with a very phase-wise approach. So enforcement is already there, Imran. Yes, coming back to your question, Mukund, I'm not very surprised with the result of the poll. It's okay. I mean, we do understand, because a lot of times, if you look at the way we support organizations, we conduct these gap assessments for them, where we identify which all departments are holding personal data, how the program will be scoping those particular departments and those particular applications going forward. And yes, a lot of customers, they have a fair idea as well where the personal data lies. And that is where, when we are building the framework, it becomes much more easier. Yeah. We can move on to the next slide. Okay.
Yeah. So I think the case studies, I think a lot of people have been asking about case studies. So here we go.
Okay, so these are some interesting project insights which we have got when we executed programs for our customers. So typically, when we talk about customer-facing channels, our first and generally, if you look at the laws, the way the laws have been designed, right? Today, if you have a website, any user that is coming to your website, there is a high possibility that third-party cookies might be getting tracked. But it's not just about the websites, even your mobile applications, right? They have a lot more capability to track the user information. And that is where we have executed projects where we have scanned the mobile applications for the customer. So the first case study which you see here is that, unlike cookie, which is a tracking technology in website, for mobile applications, it's an SDK, which is a software development kit. We have scanned it for our customers, and we got to know that applications which are built on Android versus applications which are built on iOS operating software. Android applications have much more access to personal data of the users than the applications which are built on iOS software. And the reason for that is very simple, because Android provides you a much greater flexibility to the developers to use the SDK tools which have a direct access to the user's data. They don't really take the consent of the individual before tracking the data. So location permissions are enabled by default when you see applications that are built on these kind of software. So that is something which we have seen in our project executions, and it was also confirming the fact that Apple really puts privacy as one of its key value differentiators. Then moving on to a different insight and an interesting insight which we have seen in multiple organizations, specifically with the HR department, when they're onboarding a candidate, there are multiple instances where they start collecting the personal data from the candidate before they convert into a successful employee. So let's say today, as a candidate, if I'm applying for an organization based on a job description, I'm providing a lot of personal information, but let's say I don't get selected, right? What we observed is that HR departments, they store the personal data of these unsuccessful candidates permanently, which is not really required and is a violation of the law. So if somebody is not bounded by an employee contract, you are really not required to save the personal data permanently, and you need to store it only for a certain period of time. And lastly, like I was mentioning, training and awareness forms the core crux of any privacy program. And today we see that even though we are so much active on social media, a lot of times employees share the sensitive personal data and personal data on social media. And that's where awareness has to be built in such a way where they understand uh, uh, how important it is to maintain the privacy of their digital identifiers. So this kind of training and awareness programs currently we don't see in the organizations, and probably organizations really need to focus on that.
Great. Guys, please, I know we are running a little late, but do stay on. We've got some interesting case studies that we have and problems that we have solved in terms of data privacy for a couple of interesting clients, and Smriti and Omkar have personally worked on those clients. So do stay back, and we will cover them quickly and giving you a perspective of how to go about it. Carry on, Smriti.
Yeah, we can move on to the next slide. So are there KSA government recommended data retention controls and policies? So basically data retention periods are generally not defined by any KSA government or any other law, right? But yes, there are regulatory specific laws which talk about data retention. So for example, you would see that in a financial industry, data is typically need to be retained. Financial information typically need to be retained for 10 years. And this is not just in KSA, but generally financial regulations, they have their own law. So for certain regulated industries, the retention period are defined. But again, if you want to define a retention schedule for your organization's different departments, you need to consult with the business process owners, the usage of that personal data, and then you need to define a retention schedule. So the next polling question is, have you identified all data privacy regulations that might be applicable to you? I think we are done with this question, Mukund. We can move on to the next poll.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is an interesting case study for a Saudi telecom company. When they started the data privacy program, they really wanted to build the program from scratch. And that is where all the operational assessments, which you see, privacy impact assessments, ROPAs, and other things they wanted to do. Now, the challenge with this organization was that it's a massive organization. The organization hierarchy is also very complex. And how this organization basically incorporated a technology solution to implement the privacy operations. So over to you, Omkar, you can go forward with the case study.
Yeah. So basically, there was a very heavy, you can say, reliance on the manual processes, which made it very much difficult to track personal data across various departments. And somewhere there were certain blind spots also that were actually created that posed both regulatory as well as reputational risk. So further complying matters, further complicating matters was the complex nature of evidence management, which made preparing for and responding to audits very much time consuming and inefficient. So to address these particular issues, we introduced you can say a comprehensive privacy management platform. So from data subject request handling to vendor risk assessments, consent management, privacy impact assessment, these particular modules of this particular platforms were introduced. So this solution provided a centralized framework, allowing the operator to see exactly where personal data was stored and how it was being used. Simultaneously, we also implemented, as I said earlier, privacy impact assessment module. So through this particular module, we could quickly spot and resolve any compliance related gaps, essentially further tightening overall security and governance. The results were immediate and transformative. So automated workflows streamlined to day-to-day operations, significantly reducing error and manual effort. So the telecom operator could actually now respond to the audits in a fraction of the time that they were earlier on utilizing, pulling relevant evidences, documentation from a single particular source. Visibility in relation to the data usage risk also improved a lot, ensuring alignment with KSA PDPL requirements, and at the end of the day, giving both the regulators, customers, greater confidence in the company's data protection standards. So this also particular solution, we could also essentially get all the reports very quickly, and like we could share it with all the regulators as well as the relevant stakeholders. Ultimately, what happened was this particular approach not only mitigated the pressing compliance concerns, but also it laid down somewhere a groundwork for the ongoing improvements. So by freeing up resources previously which were tied to cumbersome manual tasks, the telecom operator could actually now focus on, so majority of the team could actually go ahead and focus on the strategic initiatives that would actually drive the innovation and growth rather than just focusing on the cumbersome manual tasks. And at the end of the day, overall, the knowledge as well as the privacy practices that this particular organization had also went up and met the highest standards in relation to data privacy. Yeah. Smriti, I think over to you for the next particular use case.
Yes. So a very common question which we see is that when we talk about complexity, we have seen group holding companies. Now, private group holding companies are very common in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and we have supported them in building their privacy programs. Now, when we talk about a group holding company, typical challenges are, as a holding company, you might have multiple entities with multiple lines of businesses under your holding company, and the second challenge that we see when you are a group holding company is that because of the multiple entities that are running under a holding company, you might also be operating in multiple jurisdictions. So how do you build a privacy program that is taking into account all these challenges? So as an organization today, it's very important. The first thing we tell our customers that understand the data privacy landscape, understand the data privacy laws that are applicable to the organization, and then you move forward with building a common control framework. So as a holding company, our first approach is, whenever you are building a framework and you know which all data privacy laws are applicable to you, build a framework that you can extend to all your entities. So let's say today you have more than one law that is applicable to you, not just KSA personal data protection law, but let's also say GDPR and UA personal data protection law is applicable to you. Build a common control framework, build it at a group level, and extend the framework policies and procedures to all your entities. And in this way, you're also making sure that you have a sustainable program in place. Now, challenges which we have seen generally lie around, is the data transfer allowed from my jurisdiction to a different jurisdiction? How do we deal with the cross-border transfer challenges? So like I mentioned, all these laws, they have cross-border transfer mechanisms. And the first line of defense, again, also are your agreements and the contracts. So let's say today you are transferring data from one entity to a different entity. Do you have the right contracts in place, which is ensuring that if the personal data is being transferred from one entity to other entity, or let's say personal data is transferred outside the kingdom to a different country, do you have the contractual agreement, which is a data processing agreement, in place? So depending upon the role that you are sharing with an entity, with a service provider, or with a joint controller, you need to build these contracts in place so that you ensure that the obligation of protecting the personal data lies on both the ends. So generally, we have seen that depending upon the challenges, the solutions which we provided focused on the shared services agreements, focused on the data processing agreements. And we also saw that our principle of data minimization was also getting violated. So whenever we used to transfer data from one controller to a different processor, we used to share a lot of unnecessary personal data. So while we are building the programs, we identify these gaps and we tell them that if something can be done without sharing extra information, then that process needs to be changed, and there is no need to send the information which is not required. So our solution focused a combined approach of both process and technology, and our focus was also more on the contractual requirements. So based on the challenges of group holding companies, we provided our solutions across these areas, and the impact was very positive, because now they know that if there is a data sharing that is required internally between entities or externally with a processor, what kind of approach they need to follow. Also, when you are building a common control framework, if you are in a multi-regulatory environment, you are making sure that you are adapting to any other privacy regulation that might be applicable to you in future. So impact was positive in this case, and we could see that the framework that we built for the group holding company, it could be extended to each and every entity that was operating under it. So this was the second use case which we wanted to talk about.
Smriti, can you just go to the next polling question?
Let's look at the next polling question. Okay. So I think we have no more polling questions, but if there are any questions, you
There
can
was
ask
one,
me.
but it's fine. You continue because there was one polling question on the privacy assessment. So if you can continue talking on the slide while the polling question appears, that'd be great, so that
Okay.
people can answer the polling question. Team, I mean,
Right.
if you guys need a privacy assessment done, please answer the polling question, and we will help you take a privacy assessment test. Smriti, please continue while our customers and the audience fill the polling question.
Right. So first of all, I would like to thank everyone who joined our webinar today. I know it's on a weekday, and as we gear up for Ramadan from this month, we really wanted to have this webinar so that we can also ensure that you understand what is required in terms of KSA PDPL. So thank you so much for joining us. And as Ahlan Cyber today, and as I lead the privacy practice for the organization, we want to ensure you that we cater to customers from all the maturity levels. So today you might be an organization who doesn't understand the law well because a lot of requirements are coming from a techno-legal standpoint. So we have built our service portfolio in such a way where we support customers from various maturity levels. So if you're an organization who want to understand what the gaps are, go with a basic gap assessment exercise to understand the current maturity. Today we support organizations in gap assessment where we assess the environment, identify the gaps in terms of people, process, and technology, and provide you a roadmap on what needs to be focused on in coming 3 to 4 months so that you show a certain level of maturity in KSA PDPL. At the same time, once we do this gap assessment, once it's completed, we move towards advisory and consulting where we build the whole framework, policies, procedures that are expected from a law perspective, and we start operationalizing that. Now, today as an organization, we have a dedicated technical team who support you in implementing tool solutions. Today, a lot of privacy tools are available in the market, and our team has the right expertise to implement it. And this is where we make sure that the processes that are built as part of the framework are automated as well. Like I told you, continuous monitoring is a major focus, and we want to build something which is sustainable even in the as is state. So we have resources supporting all our customers, enabling them in the data privacy program. We run extensive training and awareness sessions, and we also support our customers in conducting internal data privacy audits as well. So if you look at the kind of portfolio and services which we provide, you may be a customer which is very new to a privacy journey, or you may be a customer who fairly understands the law well but needs certain sort of support in building the framework and other things. We have a portfolio catering to that, and Ahlan Cyber is more than happy to support any of our customers who need support in building a KSA PDPL program.
By the way, the PDPL assessment is free of cost. We don't need to take a deep look into your system, so your confidentiality is retained. So please go ahead and click on the yes. It's a very simple way of doing it. We have a very simple way of doing it. So go ahead and do respond to that.
We can move on to the next slide.
Sure, please.
Yes, so we also have our own privacy assessment test, which Mukund was mentioning. It's free of cost, and if you want to take our test, we can share the link, Mukund, with the team.
Yeah, sure, we will.
And why we want you to trust us with privacy compliance, because we have proved our credibility in the market, not because of our expertise, but because of the experience that we have in operationalizing KSA PDPL programs. Today, we have more than 40 plus customers. Most of our clientele is from the kingdom because of the fact that the law is already enforced and regulatory authorities are looking at it very keenly. We provide end-to-end privacy services covering holistically from both process and technical standpoint. We are not an organization who believes in a plug-in and a plug-out approach. We don't just build policies, procedures, some templates, and we move out. We make sure that you have the right visibility over the personal data that is being managed within your organization. And we have a rich pool of privacy experts. So with that, what I want to bring in is that we come with a lot of credibility. The consultants whom you see on the call today, including myself, we are all IPP certified. I am an FIP. Omkar is also an FIP. We are Fellow of Information Privacy. And the entire team that we have built today, we are all certified professionals. So we do understand the techno-legal landscape really, really well. And thank you so much for joining. And again, I would like to say that it's the trust of our customers that has really even made us come a long way, right, in the privacy journey. So that is a bit about our organization. We have a dedicated privacy consulting division. In case there is any support required, you can reach out to our team, and we will be talking about the point of contacts very shortly in the next slide.
Okay, somebody has asked a question. What is the expected output from the assessment? Does it tell our current maturity or the suggested plan? Yes, the answer is yes.
Yes, so we will give you both. We will tell you your current maturity in PDPL compliance, and we will also suggest you the next action plan, what needs to be done. So any gap assessment today we conduct for an organization, we make sure that you understand the scope very well that is coming out of that gap assessment. And from a deliverable standpoint, you would understand your current maturity analysis in terms of KSA PDPL and what are the immediate action items you need to prioritize in next 3 to 12 months. With that, we come to the last slide. So thank you, Amrita, for introducing us in the beginning of this presentation. And Mukund, just go back to the slide so that we can just show them the POC. So today, if you need any support, you can drop email to amrita@ahlancyber.com. So these are the email IDs. We also have marketing@ahlancyber.com. You can reach out to us. You need any support, you need any kind of information about our services, what we do in PDPL, our team will be more than happy to suggest you. So this is the contact information, and thank you so much for joining. You have been a great audience, and we really look forward to a different webinar session coming up in next 2 to 3 months. If you can join us again, and we would bring up something new again in terms of data privacy. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Smriti. And few of us.
One second.
Yes,
Somebody has one question. The question is, who are the authorized auditing bodies in KSA to conduct the audits?
So the auditing body, there is no authorization as such. It is going to be SADAIA. It's the regulatory body that's going to audit. But as such, there has been no mention or there is no clarity on if there are any specific auditing bodies that are going to conduct the audits in KSA. So you would see regulators becoming very, very active in the kingdom. So that is something which we can definitely gauge looking at the current trend.
And the resource and the documents, resources that we have shared during this presentation, we'll share it with you all after the webinar.
Right. Thank you everyone for joining.